Hey everybody, Dustin DePierac here, calling this Jeremy Price. We're sitting here on the floor of the Chrysler Center. Hopefully we don't get kicked out from this particular position. We've been asked to move a few times already today. Regardless, that just happened. Well, it didn't just happen. It was a few hours ago, and we've been kind of slow on deadline. But the point of the matter is, about 3 hours ago now, something just totally wild, crazy, insane, and unpredictable happened. IU manages to come back down 5 points with 52 seconds to go. They come back and beat Michigan thanks in large part to some missed one-on-one free throws and a putback layup by Jordan Morgan that hung on, bounced around the rim, rolled, all kinds of things. Was up there for, by my count, 1.2 seconds, which is a lot for that sort of thing. And IU wins the Big Ten title. In so many ways, this game looked over a whole bunch of different times, looked like Indiana was done. We're in a position where if Michigan makes a couple free throws, it's well passed over. But they win. They are really Big Ten outright title, champions in this one. They got to wear the Big Ten champion hats into the press room today and not feel weird about it, not feel apologetic for having cut down nets after a loss. They really got to take this one in and probably set themselves up for a number one seed in the NCAA tournament. Certainly got it for the Big Ten tournament already. And just basically as big a win as you can imagine in as surprising circumstances I think you can imagine. I mean, just what all happened here, Jeremy?
Easily the most improbable win of the season, and it'll be kind of interesting to see how this works going forward. I mean, last year the Kentucky game was kind of that defining game that kind of provided a little bit momentum, and I think the way this one ended, maybe in a positive way, could resonate the same way a little bit. And of course, the finish kind of, covers up a multitude of sins that happened along the way.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I mean, I think what's tough about this one, if there's a concern going forward, and I think we should get to this later, but this one was emotionally exhausting for this team. I mean, you got the impression, just especially after everything that happened, it looked, it was almost like a national championship celebration. I mean, they kind of looked spent after that. I mean, Victor Oladipo sort of collapsed on the floor. Tom Crean was up, hugging his family, crying. A lot of tears shed after this one, and they still have to play basketball after this, and a lot of it, just as they did after Kentucky. But there's, now it goes straight into tournament play. So that's a discussion all of its own. But as you said, some sins committed. They missed a lot of layups today. Not even so much layups, just shots in the paint. They had a really hard time scoring inside, basically. I mean, they kept getting the ball back, and they won the rebounding battle by a lot, 53-30, 24 offensive rebounds. But I think they only had about 17 second chance points for all those offensive rebounds. It just means it's had a really hard time just even making some chippies, but, and some other things. I mean, they couple occasions where they left three-point shooters in the corners. Obviously, Tom Crean pointed out that was a big problem. Lots of mistakes there in terms of letting guys, allowing them to take some shots. That really kept Michigan in the game a lot of times. But they hit big shots when they needed them. Will Shee and Jeremy Hollowell hit two back-to-back huge ones. And Cody Zeller played really, really tough again tonight.
He was outstanding. I mean, this was kind of a little reminder for everybody who's debating between Trey Burke and Victor Oladipo for Player of the Year that there was a reason Cody Zeller was the preseason Player of the Year in the Big Ten. And he dominated tonight and really was aggressive. And even when he didn't score, he missed his fair share of those layups and inside shots, and maybe didn't get to the free throw line as much as I'm sure he would have liked. But he was aggressive and kept attacking and had Mitch McGary in foul trouble. Jordan Morgan was in first half foul trouble at least. I think they went through Horford. They went to the fourth and fifth guy down the line, as a matter of fact, trying to defend Cody tonight.
Yeah. No, I think he talking about Zeller just kind of brings up, I think, an interesting theme of this one in terms of sticking with what they stuck with and what they changed on. They stuck with just keep getting the ball in the paint. I mean, they believed, obviously, that they had they had the edge with that matchup with Zeller, against Morgan and McGary and those guys. And I thought Jordan Morgan really played him tough early. Indiana had a really hard time getting the ball in the paint and getting good looks. I mean, a lot of the shots they were taking in close were contested, but they didn't quit on that. They kept getting it to Zeller, getting fouls on guys to the point where they had to take Morgan out of the game sometimes, had to take McGary out of the game sometimes, and just wore guys out. And eventually he took over, basically, and that was something they stuck with. Another thing they stuck with was the bench guys. I mean, I think it was generally the consensus, as somebody pointed out, the consensus of the world after the first half was that Tom Crean way over substituted in the first half, really cost the team some momentum in certain cases by going to guys on the bench, and Remy Abel struggled and Jeremy Hollowell struggled, it seemed like in the first half. Eventually, when they went back to those guys, it made a difference. Jeremy Hollowell especially.
Yeah, that was kind of the ironic thing is for all those struggles in the first half, it was Hollowell and Will Sheehy really that keyed the second half, and a big second half run there. Had a couple of back-to-back three-pointers that really got Indiana going, and at least temporarily kind of put them, I don't know how much in control a 4-point lead exactly is, but
they made it a shot-for-shot game. That
yes.
was the difference, is that Indiana was battling back up until that point. A lot of time was battling back from maybe a 2-possession deficit. Nobody had a lead of greater than 5 after that, and that wasn't until the last minute when Michigan had one of 5. I mean, up until, because obviously Indiana had opened up with a 10-3 lead, Michigan came right back with a 12-0 lead, eventually, or 12-0 run, eventually had a 9-0 run, I think, that made it 27-16. Indiana had to claw back all the way from that. Now, that was the second time that they took a lead. They took a 1-point lead on a 3-by hole with about 18 to go, but then those threes gave them another 2-point lead. I think that was the biggest lead they'd had since the first, beginning of the first half. And it definitely seems, to kind of put it in everybody's head, we're in this one until the end at this point.
And I think the other thing the bench did, and Victor Oladipo touched on this in the post-game press conference, was he felt like that Indiana sort of wore Michigan down a little bit, and specifically he was talking about Trey Burke, and Burke did hit some tough shots down the stretch, but even Oladipo kind of wondered, well, maybe he was just tired enough to miss that free throw in the final minute on the front end of the 1-on-1. And you never know if that made a difference or not, but
no, Vic was given some credit to people, and they deserved it on some level, but Vic gets the credit for that in terms of wearing out Trey Burke. It's the thing about using Oladipo to guard Burke against Michigan is that it obviously Oladipo can handle him. You want your best defender on the best guy, and that's the situation you have. Problem with it is, though, is if you put Oladipo on Burke, someone else has to guard Tim Hardaway Jr., somebody else has to guard Nick Stauskas, somebody else has to guard Nick Robinson III, depending on who's all out there. And that's why you open with Farrell on him, because, that way you can put Oladipo on Hardaway. Burke can guard Hardaway on some, or Farrell can guard Hardaway on some level, but it's tough. He's given up 6 inches. It's the same thing with Jordy Hulls. He's already given up 6 inches to Nick Stauskas. Those guys are being asked a lot if you put Oladipo on Burke, but eventually they just went with him and said, you know what, we'll take whatever else. If we're going to put our best guy on your best guy, and if you beat us with the other guys, we'll live with it, but this is the best thing that we can do. This is the best we can slow this guy down. And Oladipo, made it very hard for Burke. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that Burke was not even trying anymore once Oladipo got on him.
And I thought the other thing that was interesting about that strategy from the Michigan standpoint is Michigan continued to keep the ball in the hands of Burke, even with those matchups where they might have looked at putting the ball more in Hardaway's hands or whatever to take advantage of the mismatch. But they stuck with Burke and kind of lived and died
with their guy. And Burke, Burke hit some great shots. Burke was Trey Burke. He's, there's a reason it's as far as I'm concerned, it's a 3-man race for Big Ten Player of the Year. I, at the end of the day, did end up going with Oladipo. I just sent in my ballot like 20 minutes ago. That was tough. Trey Burke is awesome, and Cody Zeller is awesome, and there's 3 guys that deserve to be All-Americans, and I don't know if they'll all make first team, but they all deserve it. But one way or another, he still played a brilliant game, but Oladipo wore him out just enough, and Oladipo wore himself out. That was part physical exhaustion when he collapses at the lane. He was really, those were boxers in the 9th round. It was Oladipo and Burke. It looked like they just, beat the heck out of each other for 40 minutes, and they were both done. They were both just exhausted, I think, at the end of that game.
And that's where, for Indiana, it was a bonus to have Cody Zeller to go to. You didn't have to try to just stick the ball in Oladipo's hands.
But he made some huge shots at the end. There was the one when Watford kind of flips that thing up with no time left on the shot clock just to get it to the rim and hope something happens. Oladipo rises up, just to catch it and put it up.
In the right spot at the right time. Yeah, kind of what he does.
It's what he does. But yeah, no, basically a huge plays by so many of those guys. This becomes such a meaningful win. Obviously, makes them look, significantly less bad for the whole cutting down the net situation. At least this time they could walk away and say that they were Big Ten champs, and they did very much earn it, and they don't have to share it with anybody. First time since 1993. Clearly the number 1 seed, and I think, as we were saying earlier, I think this clinches Indy for them.
I would think so. Barring a first-round loss in the Big Ten tournament.
Which is not altogether impossible. I think it's Minnesota and Illinois, right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen the bracket yet, but those 2 teams can beat anybody on any night and lose to anybody on any night. They are the most schizophrenic teams in the Big Ten, so you never know what you're going to get with them. But continue.
But I think, other than that, I think they do have the number 1 seed, and I think, the other thing was you were talking about the emotion of this, and I think part of that stems from the fact that this is kind of the first time they've had to celebrate after a win an accomplishment of their own. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, in a lot of ways, they've kind of, I won't say backed in, but been the beneficiary
all
of other teams' losses.
All of the titles that they've had so far.
To clinch a share, to clinch the number one seed in the Big Ten tournament. All that stuff has kind of come from other games.
Right.
This time, they dictated the outcome on their own and then got to kind of enjoy the just desserts afterwards.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, they didn't wear, when they beat Ohio State, when they got those Big Ten championship hats, they did not wear those at the post-game press conference. I mean, they looked like they didn't want them. They took those, you know, imagine they took those off as soon as they could, but they probably brought them to, you know, brought them to Michigan.
I was kind of curious if those were the same ones or different
I think they
ones.
have to be.
I think they have to be.
I mean, it's possible.
But the tags were still on them all.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, nobody kept those and really took them home. But
No.
they wore those with pride this time, not apologetic at all. So, yeah, Indiana, Big Ten champs. Thanks, guys.